welcome to the sideboard here at the Star City Games Modern Open in Atlanta, part of the SCG Tour, brought to you by Ultimate Guard and Carnox Chairs. I'm Nick Miller alongside Team Lotus Box's own Zan Syed. How you doing?
Doing great.
In the heat of the Players' Championship race, notable brewer, and last week you took down regionals with a new version of the Whirza deck, or just Whirza at the time.
Yep.
Right now, Modern is just filled with these different versions of Whirza and all the things you can do with them, whether it be, paradoxical outcome, ascendancy, Whirza, and now this sort of mid-range deck that you took down the regionals with. And I haven't seen your whole team play a deck before. Usually they're kind of split.
Yeah.
You have basically everyone on this deck this weekend, and I have to know why and how you got everyone on board.
Okay, so the story starts last Open, and Abe Corrigan and I played Jeskai Ascendancy, the Jeskai Ascendancy version, but kept boarding in Okos and playing a mid-range version of the deck post-board, and I ended up finishing 12-3 short of top 8 on tiebreakers. Abe Corrigan had a vision. We followed that vision, and that was to build the mid-range version. And that was because we felt that we would look at this deck and say, this is a mana base that we want to incorporate, and that's how we came up with the mid-range version.
What are the strengths and weaknesses of this version of the deck versus what's currently going on? Because right now, a lot of people are split between kind of like the Harlan Fear camp of the Goblin Engineer build, heavy Whirza, and then there's also the people playing Paradoxical Outcome, and then your version.
So the best way to look at this is there are a lot of combo decks in the format. But if you make the Whirza deck a pure combo deck, it's just a worse combo deck than Storm, than a lot of the other combos that are going on, like Amulet Titan is kind of combo-ish. And the way you want to look at it is it's the best mid-range deck in the format because it gets its mana online faster than anybody else. It can out-control decks, and it's just the most broken mana base the format's ever seen. It's like we're playing Vintage in Modern.
Right. Obviously, you've got Astrolabe to help filter your lands. You've got Mox Opal. Then you have effectively a 2-color mana base because a lot of these other decks are playing 3 and 4 colors while you have some black cards in your sideboard. This is, the most trimmed down version of the deck I've seen in terms of colors.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Astrolabe and the Mox Opal are so easy to misinterpret because they give you so much free realm over colors and stuff like that. And I think that Whirza is like when you just let go and you're just like, let me just play a little bit of everything. What this deck does is recognizes what shell Whirza should be capitalizing on, as well as what colors are necessary so you don't get that inconsistency, which I felt with the old Whirza builds.
Sure. Other cards, we've of course got the Bauble, Mishra's Bauble here to go along with your artifact package. You've got Aether Spellbomb, Engineered Explosives, and then the sword combo here, the Thopter sword combo, which was not in your previous build. You've incorporated that and a couple of copies of Whir to make your deck a little more well-rounded this week, right? Yeah,
so, Whir pairs so well with Mystic Sanctuary, and so the thought process was one Whir, one Mystic Sanctuary, we got the combo, the game's over. But the team is split in half. Abe feels that the combo is still not necessary, and I feel like moving forward, I would like to have a auto win button. But we don't know who's right, but by the end of this weekend, we'll have a consensus.
Right. The other thing we have to talk about here is Oko obviously popped up last week. A lot of people were onto this card. You, however, have Gilded Goose in your Modern deck. A lot of Twitter hot takes going on around this card, whether or not it's Modern playable. And here, you took down regionals last week. I think the verdict is in. It belongs in this shell.
No, for sure. Gilded Goose is a very easy card to misinterpret, but it's Birds of Paradise with an upside. It's an engine that a lot of the aggro decks can't beat. If it's unbolted, you're just going to see a slew of food that's unstoppable.
Right, and that's something these decks sort of had a weakness to was a lot of aggression. You have a way to generate this life.
Yep.
I have to imagine the food being an artifact also helps when you're doing all these Whir and Urza things as well.
No, definitely. Oftentimes against the Whirza decks, people can play this pass-go game. In this version, you can't really afford to, because if you have a Goose, you're continuing to make food tokens, and there's going to be a turn where you can play Urza and hold up Cryptic Command and hold up Metallic Rebuke, because you're generating all these artifacts.
Right. On top of the Urza and the Oko stuff going on, what is really different about your take, and we had Sam Black write about this on the premium side of Star City Games this week. You have the Mystic Sanctuary package along with Cryptic Command. You also have Metallic Rebuke here.
Yep.
So you have a bunch of counter spells.
Yeah.
Talk about the difference that makes as opposed to some of the other decks that are not running those.
Well, the counter spells make it so that every deck, every matchup is winnable, because Metallic Rebuke has the ability to be online turn 1. Mox Opal, Mishra's Bauble, hold up Metallic Rebuke, and people don't see that coming, and they shouldn't really play around it. There's only 2 copies,
right? But
it's so punishing. It's like you don't recognize how powerful that is until it actually happens. It's like this deck has a Stubborn Denial that's active all the time,
right.
And it's good against actual creatures, right? Like Stubborn Denial only hits non-creatures.
Right. You actually get to tag some early threats.
Yeah.
Maybe an early Death Shadow or something like that.
And something really unique about this deck is your opponent oftentimes gets to see how they're going to die, because the Mystic Sanctuary just does that, right? Cryptic Command, bounce Mystic Sanctuary, put it back into play, use Emery to Mishra's Bauble it back right the next turn. That loop is so easy to assemble. I've never played a deck where I can draw a fetch land and win the next turn.
Right, it's kind of crazy how powerful this land is, and that's another thing that your deck gets to utilize, being 2 colors. Your mana base is a little more consistent. You get to utilize this card a lot better than some other decks.
Of course.
Emery here we already mentioned. All these other pieces are pretty stock in the Urza decks. We'll move on to the sideboard here, where you have your Black Splash, Fatal Pushes, Thoughtseize, Assassin's Trophy, and then Drown in the Lock as well. 2 copies of this card. Talk about Drown in the Lock and then your Black Splash as a whole.
Yep, so that card used to be Collective Brutality, but we noticed that the aggro matchups were like super favored. So we felt that since we had talked about this deck and this deck has gotten a little bit of hype around it, that we wanted to play a card that was good in the mirror. Abe is the one who definitely pushed for this card, and I'm excited to see how it plays out.
And Fatal Push, just your cheap interaction.
Yep.
Trophy answers everything. Thoughtseize.
Yep.
Format all-star.
Of course, because if we're playing against hyper combo decks, and that's our only bad matchup, it's really nice to have a Thoughtseize.
Right, you like your matchups again across the board, with the exception of stuff like Neobrand.
Yes.
And what else?
Devoted Druid. But besides that, everything else is pretty much a cakewalk. Eldrazi Tron can be difficult if they are on the play and have Chalice on 0, but this deck is the true Jund of the format, with a 55% win rate against almost every deck.
Right, I've been talking to your teammates, and oftentimes they're split. You guys come up with your mad scientist decks.
Yeah.
You get some members of the team to play the deck, but you guys have had a bunch of great decks this year on the tour, whether it be your Jeskai Planeswalkers deck, the Mardu Death Shadow deck.
Yep.
Here, this is the first time I've seen so many people convert to it. A lot of people were not sold on it until a couple of nights ago, and then you made everyone play some leagues, and everyone's like, this is the real deal.
Yeah, I will say that oftentimes our take is we want to force people to think, and the way we force them to think is play out of the box. Even though our deck might be slightly worse than Grixis Shadow, like Mardu Shadow, it catches people off guard. So it's a different way to metagame. But this deck is probably the deck that we've had this deck is different from those decks because it's just the truth. It's just good no matter what.
It's just the truth.
Yes.
We'll round out the sideboard here. Grafdigger's Cage, Pithing Needle, Nile Spellbomb, and Ensnaring Bridge. These are just tutor targets with
Yep.
Whirza, I imagine.
They're just great tutor targets, and the deck is so good against the field that it's important to have narrow targets, narrow answers for decks, and so graveyard hate is important for the Dredgevine matchup, and Ensnaring Bridge is just really good against the field right now.
All right, well, you've called the deck the truth. You guys are as excited about the deck as any deck I've seen the team on before. What are the expectations this weekend? Because you got a lot of people doubting the deck from the outside.
The expectation is to get the rest of the boys that are not qualified for the PC locked up, and I would be happy with whatever else happens. But I do want to say I could not have done this without Abe Corrigan, and I could not have done this without Sam Black pushing Gilded Goose. And the deck is a true Team Lotus box deck. And if you wanted access to this and a sideboard guide, you could have found it on our Patreon right before this tournament and even right before regionals.
All right, well, Zan, we're going to see how the deck does. It's round 2. Y'all, most of you are coming off buys next round. Good luck. Thanks for this as usual. Stay tuned to Star City Games all weekend long for the action here in Atlanta.